So have you noticed it? It feels like something really fundamental about childhood has just changed. Almost overnight, right? What used to be all about outdoor play and, actual face-to-face interaction has become, well, something completely different. So let's get into what actually happened to our kids, because this might be one of the most sudden and damaging social experiments in all of human history. Yeah, for pretty much all of human history, childhood was what you'd call play-based. Kids learned by getting out there, exploring the real world, together. But then in just the last decade or so, we've swapped all that out for a phone-based childhood. And I mean, the entire structure of their lives has been totally rewired, shifting from the physical world to a virtual one. And look, this wasn't some slow, gradual change. Not at all. There's a social psychologist, Jonathan Haidt, who calls this whole period the Great Rewiring. And he argues that in just 5 years, get this, between 2010 and 2015, the kind of childhood that most of us knew was basically just erased. So what exactly happened in those 5 years? Well, it was all about the tech. See, back in 2010, a lot of kids had flip phones. And here's the key thing. That phone was just a tool, right? It was a way to text your friend and meet up in the real world. But by 2015, whoa, everything had flipped. The smartphone, with its front-facing camera, with Instagram, with high-speed internet, it wasn't the tool anymore. It became the interaction. When Jonathan Haidt says this, he's not exaggerating. He's not trying to be dramatic. It's just a really blunt, straightforward description of how childhood itself was completely re-engineered. It literally moved from the physical world into the virtual one. Okay, so you might be thinking, hang on, millennials had cell phones too, what's the big deal? And you're right, they did. But just look at the difference. A millennial's flip phone was for calling and basic texting to meet up. A Gen Z smartphone, that's a portal to the entire internet. It didn't just help with meetups, it flat out replaced them. And giving that kind of portal to kids right as they're hitting puberty, well, that's exactly when we see their mental health just plunge into despair and depression. And, well, this great rewiring had some truly devastating consequences. We are now living through a completely unprecedented epidemic of mental illness among young people. So let's break down exactly what's being lost here. This phone-based life, it's basically pushing out the absolute building blocks of a healthy childhood. I'm talking about stuff like sleep, physical exercise, just getting outside in the sunlight. But it's also displacing something maybe even more important, that crucial social development. The thousands of little face-to-face interactions where you learn how to read a room, how to handle a disagreement, how to build a real friendship. Even the laughter you'd hear in school hallways is getting replaced. And the numbers here are, well, they're just staggering. 5. 5 hours. That is the average amount of time a teenager spends just on social media. Every single day. I mean, that's basically a part-time job. An amount of time that used to be spent playing or doing homework or just hanging out with family. And hey, remember, that's just social media. You add in all the gaming, the streaming, everything else, and the grand total skyrockets to between 7 and 9 hours a day on screens. Just think about that for a second. For so many teenagers, their phone is their main reality. They're spending more time on it than they are sleeping, or even talking to their own parents. And the results of all this? Well, it's an unprecedented epidemic of anxiety and depression among young people. The link is just so clear. This massive shift in how kids spend their time didn't just happen at the same time as the mental health crisis. It looks like it triggered it. The connection is pretty much undeniable. Okay, so that's the problem. And yeah, it's a huge one. But here's the thing. This isn't some force of nature that we're powerless against. This is a problem that we created, which means we have the power to fix it. But, and this is a big but, it means we have to act together. And this gets to the core of the challenge. It's something called a collective action problem. Basically, it's a situation where everyone would be better off if we all cooperated, but we don't because of our own individual interests. Think about it. Why does a parent give their 10-year-old a smartphone? Because the kid comes home saying, "But mom, everyone else has one. I'm going to be left out." And of course, no parent wants their kid to be the social outcast, so they cave, even if it goes against their better judgment. We're all kind of trapped in this cycle. But we can actually use that same peer pressure and turn it around. The solution really comes down to 4 key steps. First, we have to make schools phone-free zones. And I mean truly phone-free, where phones get locked away for the entire day. Second, delay smartphones until high school.
A basic phone for calls and texts? Sure, maybe, but not a portal to the whole internet. Third, parents have got to coordinate. Talk to the other parents in your kid's class, in your neighborhood. If everyone's on the same page, no kid feels like the only one. And fourth, we have to demand some action from the government to create some real guardrails here.
And you know what? That last point is actually happening. This problem is so clear, so obvious, that it's getting rare bipartisan support in the US Congress. I mean, this is one of the only things uniting Democrats and Republicans right now. And why is that? It's because they're parents too. They see exactly what's going on with their own kids. That's why you're seeing real momentum for things like the Kids Online Safety Act. This isn't a left or right issue, it's a generational one. And it's so important to frame this the right way. This whole thing isn't about taking something away from our kids. It's not about being restrictive just for the sake of it. The real goal here is to give them something back, something incredibly precious. What we're trying to do is give kids back a real-world childhood, one that's filled with independence, with free play, with adventure, and with actual responsibilities. You know, a childhood where kids are out there getting into a little bit of trouble with their friends and then figuring out how to get out of it together. That is how you build resilience. That's how you grow up. Jonathan Haidt has this quote that just nails it. He says, "Smartphones are experience blockers." And that's exactly what they are. They literally get in the way of all the real-world experiences, the messy relationships, and the tough challenges that a kid absolutely needs to grow into a healthy, capable adult. So the question for all of us is pretty simple, right? How can we give our kids back their childhood? How can we clear the path so they can have the kind of life they actually deserve? It's time we put an end to this huge, unintentional experiment and finally give them back the real world.